Beyond the Loop. Chapter 6. The Shadow of the City. Lanny voiceover, her voice now rasping and weary, yet filled with a terrifying lucidity. We emerged from the throat of the earth, not into the paradise I had known for 1,000 years, but into a nightmare of steel and chlorophyll. The first night had not ended with a sunrise. It had ended with a transformation. The jungle was no longer just trees and vines. It had begun to mimic the world Elias carried in his mind. The great banyans had stretched upward, their trunks squaring off into sharp, obsidian angles that resembled the skeletons of skyscrapers. The vines that used to drip with sweet nectar were now thick, black bundles of copper cabling, pulsing with a sick, blue electricity that hissed in the damp air. The air was a suffocating shroud. It smelled of wet concrete, ozone, and the bitter metallic scent of rusted iron. I watched as a hibiscus flower bloomed before my eyes. Its petals were not velvet, but thin, razor-sharp sheets of tinted glass, reflecting a sky that was no longer blue, but a bruised, smog-choked gray. Beside me, Elias was a ghost in a suit of scars. He walked through the brush as if he were navigating a boardroom he had long ago abandoned. He didn't seem surprised by the transformation. To him, this was the only reality left. The island was simply reflecting his internal rot, building a tomb of glass in the heart of the Pacific. We reached the ridge overlooking the village. I stopped, my breath catching in a throat that felt like it was lined with ash. The huts were gone. In their place, the island had birthed a cluster of low, windowless concrete blocks, strangled by bioluminescent roots. My people, they were there, but they were no longer breathing. They stood like statues of gray clay in the middle of the square, their eyes open and fixed on a horizon that had disappeared. They were caught in the between, frozen artifacts of a loop that had crashed. Elias stopped at the edge of the cliff. He looked down at his hand, the one fused with the silver scar. The metal was spreading. It was moving up his neck, a fine mesh of wires and mercury-tinted veins, mapping the geography of the machine onto his very soul. He didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. He just stared at the center of the island, where a massive spire of glass and bone was growing toward the clouds, reaching for a heaven that had turned its back on us. "It's beautiful," I whispered, though the words felt like poison. I didn't mean the sights. I meant the sheer, brutal honesty of it. The island was no longer pretending. The mask of the tropical sanctuary had been torn away to reveal the engine of our collective sorrow. We began the descent into the new city. The ground was a mosaic of mud and asphalt. Every time I touched a leaf, I felt a faint vibration, a data stream, a memory of a stock market crash, a whispered phone call from a world 3,000 miles away. The atmosphere was an ocean of static. It pressed against my eardrums until I tasted copper. I looked at Elias, and for a fleeting second, the glass skyscraper behind him seemed to align perfectly with his silhouette. He was the architect, And I was the foundation he was crushing. We reached the base of the great spire. The air here was so thick with ozone that sparks danced between our fingertips. The between was reaching its limit. The island couldn't hold this much reality and this much myth at the same time. The fabric of the world was beginning to fray at the edges, revealing the white, empty void beyond the code. The shadow of the city had swallowed the sun. We were standing in the heart of a civilization made of ghosts and gears. Elias looked at me, his eyes now two flickering screens of white noise. He reached out his silver-veined hand, and as our fingers brushed, the entire island let out a final, agonizing groan. The last sunset was coming, and it wouldn't be red. It would be the color of a dead channel.